I'm Chris Newton, creator of Feed, the Vampire Mythos RPG. In 10-Minute Mythos, I prove the endless possibilities of vampire role-playing by taking one random inspiration and using it to sketch out an original vampire mythos, all in 10 minutes. No prep, no script, just one gamer who loves a good vampire story. Wish me luck. Welcome to 10-Minute Mythos. Normally on this show, I work from a random prompt, but occasionally I see something that I just have to babble about for 10 minutes, and that's what I've decided to do today. There is a person named Canna Geek, that's what they're called on Twitter, posted a really cool thing, a prompt for a campaign, or really more of a genre called Abolitionpunk, which I thought was a cool idea, kind of dark, really, really dark. And I thought it was just right for Feed, because, Feed is, of course, being a vampire game with all this kind of loss of humanity and all that stuff. It's really intended to go to psychological, dark places, as well as being able to do more fun kinds of games. But it's very, very personal. So I thought, let's see if we can adapt his basic idea to Feed. So that's what I'm doing this episode, and I've already wasted some time, so I'll get started. The thing that really struck me about this idea is how it can be at once so dark and yet so morally pure in a way. Typically when we think of abolitionists, we're thinking of kind of very proper, women back home in the North writing letters and that sort of thing. We don't think so much about, the John Browns and the willingness to really put it all out there for this cause, for this moral cause, and also the human cost of abolition, the need for a violent restructuring in some ways of the South, of a corrupt system. So here's my idea. We've got a campaign where vampires are basically like agents of Old Testament style justice. The way this would work, and you'd want to create a very dark, very gothic atmosphere, bring in all the tropes of the Southern Gothic, but change them a little bit so that what they reflect is, this is so wrong. What's going on in the South is so wrong that the land rejects it, the earth rejects it, the whole spirit of everything rejects it, and God rejects it. These are characters who probably, for the most part, are going to be Christian, given the time period and the place. Basically, they put you in the ground, and you can't rest. The world and God reject you and send you back to go tear it down because this is so wrong. And what this does, it would set up, I think, a really cool moral contrast and a really unusual moral dilemma for these characters. Vampiric traits, as the characters gain them, because in Feed you've got these human traits and then you're trading them gradually for vampiric traits that reflect loss of humanity in exchange for something else. You start with human traits that are going to represent your connection to society. They're going to reflect that you are integrated into Southern society in some way, or into the society of the United States or whatever, and you have human connections. This is replaced by vampiric traits that reflect not evil, but, because Feed is flexible in this way, the traits aren't evil, but they reflect, again, Old Testament style justice. The forces of nature and the forces of heaven want to turn you into the plague that this place deserves for what it's doing. And so you're playing characters who probably want to do this, right? It's abolition punk, so the idea is these are characters are being reanimated, people who the injustice doesn't sit right with them either. That's why they're attuned to these spiritual forces that are like bringing back the dead as instruments of vengeance and reform. And yet, how much are you willing to sacrifice to see justice done? How much are you willing, what human cost are you willing to tolerate to tear it all down? The prompt that Canna Geek wrote actually captures this really well. Burning down churches, blowing up people's homes, plantation houses, all this stuff. People are dying, innocents are dying, because this is Old Testament style justice, because this is so wrong that it needs to be burned to the ground, it needs to be razed, and no one is safe. Are you comfortable with that? Or at some point, do you draw the line? Do you take something like a human trait that's connected to family in the South, or a human trait that's reflected into, whether it's, you have a soft spot for, say, animals, or maybe you're an ex-slave and your human traits are, compassion for those who've gone through the same things you've gone through. Some slaves are going to have to die. They're going to be collateral, just like anyone else. Are you willing? Do you hate the system so much that you're willing to see other slaves like you, other innocents, die in your quest to end it? This is a game that would go to very dark places. Um, so in terms of what you could do to support that mechanically, I think vampires who do have to hide from the sun, I think that would be good because it gives you the sense of being outlaws. It gives you the sense of being on the run. You get the punk aspect of Abolition Punk from this takes place at night. You're outcasts. You're rogues. You're on your own. You have to find your own way to end a system that's so deeply entrenched. And of course, this is more powerful, really, than like say the corporations in Cyberpunk have nothing on the on white dominance of the South at this time. So you're really like spitting in the wind on this one. Like you're going up against heavy forces against you, and yet you have God on your side, which is where these vampiric traits would come in. And I don't want it to be specifically religious, but I think religious characters would think of it in those terms. I'm thinking of plagues. I'm thinking of disease. I'm thinking connect the vampire mythos to tropes of the destruction of evil societies from the Bible, but also from other kinds of folklore and religion and traditional beliefs. Because again, you could have Native American characters. Basically, you become an instrument of destruction. So it starts with you just having the claws. You're fast, like you have the ability to destroy in a very visceral way. But then it goes on to like locusts, storms. The earth won't bear its fruit. You're bringing disease to communities. Basically, if you're willing to, these forces that reanimated will turn you into a walking disaster that destroys everything indiscriminately. And the only way that you can mitigate it is by stopping it up, by taking those spiritual forces calling out for destruction inside you and saying, no, I'm going to maintain some humanity. I'm going to spare something. Again, this brings you to the Old Testament. Think of the moral conflict where, God tells the Israelites to go and, slay them to a man, like kill everybody, kill the livestock, kill everything. And inevitably there was somebody who didn't really want to go through with it. This gives you a chance in a game context to problematize that and say, what is right here? I mean, when you're up against monolithic evil like this, is it right to stop anywhere? Or do you just keep destroying? Do you let any of the infection survive, basically, out of compassion or your various compunctions or whatever? So I think traits that lend themselves to indiscriminate destruction would really help. It's something you release, not something you use like a scalpel. In terms of the normal vampiric weaknesses, I think an undead nature, these are clearly unnatural creatures. I would say they should look human so they can get along, but they should definitely be undead physiologically, all that stuff. These, of course, are all dials in feed that you can turn, so I would say go on the more monstrous end. In terms of what your protagonists would be, where they would come from, I'd say ideally these would be people who can find each other in various ways. It'd be good if there was some supernatural mechanism. So you might add it as a special rule that they can sense each other, and I think definitely they should all be raised by the same forces so that all vampires basically occur in history in a moment and a place where whatever divine or spiritual force this is wants destruction, and they know that they're kindred spirits. They may come from totally different sides of various political, racial factions and all that, but they all want to see this burn for whatever reason, and that's why they've been brought back. So that way you have an innate sense like we may be different, but at least in a cosmological sense, we're all allies. We're all agents of destruction, and the only way to keep us from basically burning down the South is to kill us, which humans would quickly discover, people in power would quickly discover. You can also have the idea of vampires having like Renfields and thralls and all that stuff. You could have human followings, humans who are sympathetic to this cause and want to bring down this corrupt system, want to bring down slavery and free the slaves, who are working for vampires as like charismatic leaders, even though these vampires are basically destructive. Like they're basically incompatible with human life. They bring misfortune. And so there is that nihilism of the sort of punk ending. Like the only way this ends well is for it to burn to the ground and the grass to grow up over it. So that if you're a human follower, if you're like a Renfield of one of these vampires, if you're a freed slave, or if you're a sympathizer, from the north or whatever, you don't join them for this bright, shiny, optimistic future. You join them because you believe that your own destruction and the destruction of everything around you is necessary now that things have gotten so bad. So I see that I'm about out of time. I hope that I've done this prompt justice. I want to thank Canna Geek for this. Of course, I'm going to immediately, as soon as I post this, shoot off a tweet and let everybody know where this came from. But yeah, I think it's an awesome premise, and kind of forced me to do an episode because this is just so perfect for feed. This is a game I would love to play. certainly the way you've described it. And if I were playing it with Feed as a vampire story, I'd play it the way I've described here. So yeah, I think that about does it for my 10 minutes. In fact, I have a little bit of time to spare. So yeah, it's a very, very, very fruitful premise. So I'll see you guys next time on the next 10-minute Mythos.